I found the first bone while I was cleaning out the old wine cellar. Now, my son-in-law Greg had told me in no uncertain terms to stay out of there. He said a pipe burst last week, and the whole space was a muddy, ruined mess. But I am a woman who cleans when she's worried, and I was worried about my daughter Emily. So I went down anyway, my old rubber boots on my feet and my determination in my heart. What I found wasn't mud. It was dry as a bone down there, pardon the expression. The air was still and dusty, smelling of old stone and forgotten things. I was running a rag along the rough foundation wall when I saw it, a little piece of white wedged deep in a crack between two crumbling bricks. I had to work it loose with the tip of my knitting needle, which I always keep in my apron pocket. It came free and rolled into my palm. A finger bone. Small and delicate, whiter than white, like it had been polished. My Emily had hands like that. My heart just about stopped right then. Greg's lie was sitting right there in my hand, clean and dry. He told me it was flooded. He told me to stay out. A cold understanding settled in my stomach. I had about 3 hours until Greg was due back from his sudden business trip. 3 hours in this quiet, dusty cellar. What else was he hiding? I kept moving, because stopping meant thinking, and thinking meant falling apart. I got my little handheld vacuum, the one I use for drapery, and I started on the mortar lines between the bricks, sucking out years of grit and spider homes. My thoughts were a terrible storm. This bone meant the man I knew, the gentle, quiet man who married my bright girl, was gone. If he lied about this, what else? I felt trapped by his neat schedule, his control over this big, silent house he moved us into after Emily, after she was gone. Then the vacuum nozzle caught on something. A little metallic clink, not a pipe. I reached into the crevice, my fingers trembling, and pulled out a thin, tarnished chain. Dangling from it was a tiny silver pendant. A hummingbird, its wings etched with delicate lines. I knew it instantly. I gave that necklace to Emily for her 16th birthday. She wore it every single day, said it reminded her of the hummingbirds we'd watch from my kitchen window. She never, ever took it off. I closed my fist around it, the metal cold against my skin, and the whole world seemed to tilt. That's when I heard it, the low rumble of a car engine pulling up the gravel drive. 2 hours early. My blood turned to ice. I stood there frozen at the bottom of the stairs, that bone and necklace hidden in my clenched hand, listening to the heavy footsteps cross the kitchen floor above me. The cellar door let out that long, slow creak it always does. A slice of yellow light fell down the wooden steps. "Margaret?" Greg's voice floated down, smooth and warm as melted butter. "You down there?" My heart gave a hard, painful thump against my ribs. I couldn't let him find me like this, not with the bone and the necklace right there in my open hand. It felt like getting caught with my hand in the cookie jar, only 1,000 times worse. In one frantic motion, I dropped the locket into the deep pocket of my wool cardigan and closed my fist tight around that tiny, awful bone. It was so small, like something from a bird, but I knew it wasn't. Greg's footsteps were heavy and sure on the wooden stairs. I could picture him coming down, step by step, that familiar creak on the third one from the top. I fumbled for the vacuum cleaner's switch, my fingers clumsy. I turned it back on, and its electric whine suddenly filled the damp, dusty space, covering the sound of my panicked breathing. I aimed the nozzle at a dusty corner, presenting my back to the room, trying to look busy and oblivious. "Gregory, you're early," I called out, my voice aiming for light and surprised. I made a point of not turning around. The peaceful little facade we'd been living under was fractured now, the pretense shattered into sharp pieces between us. I could feel him looming behind me, a large, solid presence blocking the only way out of the basement. The light from the single bulb seemed to dim. "I told you this area was unsafe, Margaret," he said. His voice was closer now, right over my shoulder. I could feel the heat of him just behind me, too close for comfort. He reached past my shoulder then, not towards me, but to the stone wall itself. His hand, so much bigger than Arthur's ever was, went straight to a specific brick. He tapped it, 3 rows up from the floor, 4 bricks in from the corner. A practiced movement. "See?" he said, his voice dropping to a low, confidential tone that didn't match the words. "The mortar's completely shot. This whole section could go at any moment." As he spoke, I caught the scent of his breath. Spearmint gum and something metallic underneath, like old pennies. A cold clarity washed over me. He wasn't down here checking on me. He was checking on the wall. His secret was in the wall. My stomach turned to ice. I made myself turn around, forcing my face into a polite, grandmotherly smile, clutching the vacuum cleaner's handle like a lifeline, like a shield. "Just doing my part," I said, my voice too bright. "This old house needs looking after, doesn't it?" He smiled back, but it never reached his eyes. Those eyes were fixed on the wall behind me, scanning, checking. I saw a flicker of something, relief, when he saw the brick looked undisturbed. Then his gaze snapped back to me, and the smile widened into something that felt more like a threat. He said his next sentence slowly, each word deliberate. "Why don't I help you? We can clear this old junk out together, right now." It wasn't an offer. It was an order. He meant to stand here and watch me, to make sure I left with nothing and discovered nothing more. The tiny bone was a burning secret in my clenched fist, hidden in the folds of my house dress. The chill of the cellar seeped into my bones, but it was nothing compared to the cold dread that washed over me when I saw Greg standing on the bottom step. My heart did a little flip. I needed to get out of here, and I needed to do it with the knowledge of what I'd found without him insisting on one of our long, drawn-out joint cleaning sessions. The box of his mother's things I'd been supposedly sorting sat innocently in the corner, a perfect cover story. But my real evidence was the memory of that hollow sound, a secret humming in the dark behind the wall. "Oh, don't be silly," I said, my voice a little too bright. I reached out and gave his arm a pat, feeling the sturdy wool of his sweater. "You just got home from work. You must be tired. I'm finished down here anyway. It's just dusty old business." I made a move to go around him, my body angled toward the stairs and freedom. But he shifted, just a little. A subtle, almost polite block. He filled the space. My own trapped fear fluttered in my chest, a frantic bird in a cage. He had that calm, immovable authority of a man standing in his own home, in his own domain, and I was suddenly so aware I was just a guest in it. "Nonsense," he said, his tone gentle but leaving no room for argument. "I feel guilty having you do this, Mom. Really." Before I could protest again, his hands closed over mine on the vacuum cleaner's handle. His grip was firm, warm, and completely in control. He took it from me. "Let me finish this bit. You go on up and put the kettle on. I could use a cup of tea." It was a dismissal, wrapped in the very politeness I'd taught him. A polite shove toward the kitchen, where I belonged. My mind raced. If he stayed down here, if he so much as glanced at that specific wall with a contractor's eye. Desperation, sharp and sour, rose in my throat. I had to break the moment. I had to make him see this was nothing, just an old woman's clumsiness. So I acted. I let my foot catch on the edge of a loose floorboard I'd carefully noted earlier. With a small, practiced gasp, I pretended to stumble. I let my balance go, throwing my weight sideways so my hip connected squarely with the suspect wall. It wasn't a gentle tap. It was a solid, purposeful thud. The sound that echoed back was unmistakable. A deep, resonant thump-thump, empty and wrong. Not the solid, dead sound of brick and mortar. This was the sound of a void, a hidden space, the sound of a secret. The gentle hum of the furnace seemed to vanish. The world went perfectly, terribly still. Greg went absolutely rigid. His eyes, which had been on me with mild concern, snapped to the spot on the wall as if pulled by a magnet. I watched his face. I saw the very moment it happened. The kindly concern in his gaze flickered, then died, replaced by a cold, swift calculation. It was like watching a shutter slam down. He knew. He knew I'd heard it. He knew I understood what that sound meant. Slowly, ever so slowly, he turned his head back to me. He gave me a smile, but it was all wrong. It was slow, deliberate, and didn't touch the new chill in his eyes. "Well," he said, his voice too even. "Sounds worse than I thought. Dry rot, maybe. I'll have to get a contractor to look at that." He placed the vacuum cleaner down with careful precision. Then he stepped toward me, his hand coming up to guide me by the elbow. His touch was firm. "Let's go upstairs, Margaret. Now." The chill of the cellar was still in my bones, but I knew I couldn't stay down there another second. I had to get out, and I had to find a safe place for what I'd found. A place my son-in-law Greg would never think to look. My heart was hammering so hard I thought it might crack a rib. I climbed the stairs, that horrible little bone and the delicate chain feeling like a live coal in my tightly closed hand. Just holding it made my skin crawl. Stepping into the kitchen was like walking into another world. It was so bright and normal. Sunlight streamed through the checkered curtains my Emily had picked out years ago. I could see the red bread box on the counter. The everyday sight of it all was somehow more terrifying than the dark cellar. It was a mask, a lie. Greg was there, watching me. His eyes followed every tiny move I made. I tried to act normal, filling the old kettle at the sink to make some tea, but my hands were trembling. "You seem rattled, Margaret," he said. He didn't move from where he leaned against the counter, his arms crossed. "That cellar is spooky, I guess. Full of shadows." He was testing me. I was sure of it. My mind was racing, trying to think of a hiding spot. My purse was in the living room, but that was too obvious. My room was upstairs, too far and too risky. He wasn't letting me out of his sight. Then, a miracle. The doorbell rang, sharp and insistent. Greg's face tightened with immediate irritation. The mailman was at the door with a registered letter that needed a signature. Greg sighed, deeply annoyed by the interruption. "I'll get it," he said. And finally, blessedly, he turned his back and walked out of the kitchen. The moment he was gone, I moved. I didn't run to my purse. My eyes landed on the antique flower canister sitting right there on the counter. It was a big white ceramic thing with blue flowers, a piece I'd inherited from my own mother. Greg never baked. He'd never have a reason to open it. In 2 quick steps, I was there. I lifted the heavy lid, plunged my hand into the soft, cool flower, and dropped the little bone and the gold necklace deep into the middle. I gave my hand a shake to bury them completely, then settled the lid back on, just as I heard Greg's voice at the front door, thanking the mailman. He came back into the kitchen, and my attention was immediately caught by the envelope in his hand. It wasn't junk mail. It was a formal, important-looking letter. I could read the return address clearly, the name of a life insurance company. My eyes jumped to the lines below. The beneficiary was listed as Gregory A. Harris. The insured person was Emily M. Harris. My breath caught in my throat. He saw me looking. He didn't try to hide it or slip it into a drawer. Instead, he walked calmly to the kitchen table and placed it right there between us, like he was putting down a winning card. "Final paperwork," he said, his voice soft and deliberate. He held my gaze, watching for my reaction. After all this time, they're finally ready to declare her legally dead. The words hung in the air, heavy and final. He was telling me it was over, that I should give up. But all I could think about was the proof I now had, hidden in a canister of flour, and the cold, calculated look in his eyes. I had to react normally when he delivered that death blow of a document. My whole body wanted to recoil, but I held it still. Inside, a scream was trying to claw its way out of my throat, and swallowing it down felt like swallowing broken glass. My mouth went dry. I looked at the paper in his hands, that official stamp, and all I could whisper was, "I see." I was looking right at him, and for the first time, his performative sadness looked like what it was, a mask, and I was starting to see the hairline cracks running through it. "It's for the best, Margaret," he said, his voice so carefully measured. "For closure." Closure. What a clean, simple word. He'd used paperwork and quiet pressure to bury my child in the foundation of his building, to make her disappear into a business transaction. I felt a hot wave of nausea, but just nodded. I had to turn away, so I moved to the old kettle on the stove, pretending to fuss with it just to hide my face. The familiar yellow ceramic felt cool under my fingers. I took a slow, quiet breath, and then heard my own voice speaking, steady and plain, as if it belonged to someone else. "I think I'd like to have a small memorial," I said, staring at the kettle. "Nothing big, just here in the garden. Emily loved the roses." I was playing a game now, one I didn't know the rules to, and all my moves were guesses. The kitchen was very quiet, except for the hum of the refrigerator. He was silent for such a long moment that I finally had to glance over. He was just standing there, considering me. "Of course," he said finally. "That would be a nice thing to do." But his voice was distant, like he was already thinking of something else. He walked over to the back door and looked out at the garden, slipping his hands into his trouser pockets. The afternoon light caught the grey in his hair. "You know," he said, almost thoughtfully, "the rose bed by the old oak tree would be the perfect spot. Sheltered. Pretty." He paused. "It needs turning over, though. I haven't tended it in years. The soil is very hard there, packed down." He glanced back at me over his shoulder, his expression mild. "I could start digging it this afternoon, to prepare the ground for you." The specific location he'd chosen hit me like a punch to the chest. The oak tree. My mind raced, flipping through old memories like pages in a ledger. And then I found it. Years ago, he'd complained about that very tree. He'd said its roots were a nuisance, that they were causing cracking in the foundation wall of the cellar directly below. He'd wanted to cut it down, but I'd fought him on it. I'd loved that tree. Now, he was pointing to the spot beneath it. He wasn't suggesting a memorial site for Emily. He was telling me, calmly and clearly, where another body was buried. The chill that went through me was so deep, it felt like my bones had turned to ice. I stood by the kettle, my hands suddenly cold, and nodded again, because it was all I could do. The understanding settled in my stomach, heavy and sour. He was showing me his hand, and the game had just become deadly serious. The silence after Greg's suggestion was thick. I watched his back as he looked at the garden, knowing with cold certainty he wasn't planning a memorial. He was marking a grave. My hands were on the kettle, but my mind raced. I had to get out of there. I needed to think and to see what else was in that flower canister. "I'll let you get to it," I said, my voice steady. I turned off the stove. "I'll lie down. All this is a lot." I moved toward the doorway, acting slow and tired. Greg turned from the window. He nodded. "Take all the time you need?" He didn't stop me. He walked to the back door and opened it. "I'll start digging. The soil needs breaking up." I didn't look back. I went down the hall to the stairs, each step heavy. Upstairs, I didn't go to my room. I listened. I heard the back door shut, then a shovel being dragged from the garage. Good. He was outside. I hurried back to the kitchen, my heart pounding. The flour canister was on the counter. I lifted the lid, plunged my hand in, and felt around. My fingers closed over the tiny bone and chain. I pulled them out, wiping flour on my apron. I needed a better hiding place. I looked at the old grandfather clock in the living room. It hadn't worked in years. I hurried in, the floor creaking. I opened the clock's front panel, reached up into the dusty works, and tucked the evidence into a hollow space behind the weights. I closed it gently. Just then, I heard a sound from the garden. A sharp, metallic clang, the shovel hitting something hard, not a root. I moved to the window and peeked out. Greg was kneeling by the oak tree, brushing dirt from something in the hole. He lifted a small rectangular object and wiped it on his pants. It was a metal lockbox. He glanced toward the house. I ducked away, but not before I saw him slip the box into his jacket pocket. My breath caught. What was in that box? More secrets. I had to know. Now he was coming back inside. I heard the shovel scrape the step. I hurried upstairs to pretend to be in my room, but my mind was on that box. If he had a lockbox buried, what else was hidden here? And what would he do if he found out I knew? From my bedroom window, I watched Greg come back into the house. He didn't look up. He was focused on the box in his hands, wiping it with a rag. He disappeared into his study, closing the door firmly behind him. That door was always locked, a fact I'd never questioned until now. My curiosity was a live wire, buzzing with danger. I needed to see what was in that study, but with Greg in there, it was impossible. Now I needed to wait for an opportunity, and I had to prepare. I spent the next hour pretending to nap, but my mind was racing. I thought about Emily, about the last time I saw her. She'd been happy, or so I'd thought. Greg had been so attentive. Now, every memory felt tainted, like looking at a photograph and seeing the monster in the background for the first time. Knowing the truth brought a constant, gnawing fear. It sat in my stomach like a stone. The pressure arrived with a phone call. I heard Greg's voice from behind the study door, low and urgent. I crept into the hall, straining to listen. "Not yet," he was saying. "She's getting suspicious. I need to handle it." A pause. "No, the insurance is clear. Once it's processed, we're done." My blood ran cold. He was talking about me. I was a problem to be handled. I retreated to my room, my hands trembling. I had to act. But I was alone in this big house with a man who buried secrets in his garden. Everything changed when I remembered the spare key. Years ago, Emily had given me a set of keys to this house, just in case. I'd kept them in my jewelry box, a small antique thing I'd brought from my own home. I rummaged through it now, past costume jewelry and old photos, until my fingers closed on the cold metal. There it was, A small silver key labelled study, but using it meant risk. If Greg caught me, it was over. I waited until evening. Greg announced he was going out for a while to meet a client for dinner. He looked at me with those calm, dead eyes and said, "You'll be all right here, won't you, Margaret?" It wasn't a question. It was a warning. The moment his car pulled out of the drive, I moved. I took the key and went downstairs. The house was silent. Too silent. Every creak made me jump. I approached the study door, my heart hammering. I inserted the key, turned it slowly, and heard the click. The door swung open. The room was neat, organized. A large desk, bookshelves, a filing cabinet. But my eyes went straight to the lockbox, sitting open on the desk. Inside, I saw bundles of letters, photographs, and a small, leather-bound journal. I stepped closer, my breath shallow. I reached for the journal, but as I did, I heard a sound from the hallway, the front door opening. Greg was back early. I froze when I heard the front door close and Greg's footsteps in the hall. They were heading toward the kitchen. I had seconds. I grabbed the journal from the lockbox and shoved it into my waistband, covering it with my sweater. I closed the box quietly. I couldn't just walk out. I needed a cover. I grabbed an old atlas from a side table and stepped into the hall, closing the study door. Greg came out of the kitchen with a glass of water. "Margaret, what are you doing down here?" I held up the atlas and forced a smile. Couldn't sleep. Thought I'd look up places for Emily's memorial. The lie came easily. He looked at me, then at the closed study door. "Don't stay up too late. I have some work to do. Good night." He walked to the study and tried the knob. It was locked. He patted his pockets. "Left my key upstairs. It can wait." He started for the stairs, then paused and looked back. "Leave the memorial planning to me. You just rest." His tone was gentle, but his eyes were hard. Then he went up. I stood there, the atlas heavy in my hands. I waited until I heard his bedroom door close. Then I rushed to my room and locked the door. I pulled out the journal. It had a worn leather cover. I opened it. The handwriting was Greg's, neat and precise. But the words were awful. Dates, locations, descriptions. Lakeview Park, brunette, late 20s, necklace taken. Highway rest stop redhead, early 30s, ring kept. My stomach turned. I flipped through with shaking hands. Then I saw it. A date from 3 years ago. Home. Emily, finally. Hummingbird necklace, soil still loose from rose planting. I dropped the journal like it was on fire. Soil still loose from rose planting. The oak tree. He'd buried something there after killing my Emily. He'd documented it. This knowledge brought a grief so deep, it hollowed me out. But alongside it came a cold, sharp rage. I had proof, but proof wasn't enough. I had to stop him. I heard a noise from his room, a drawer opening and closing. He was still awake. I had to hide the journal. I slipped it under my mattress, near the headboard. It felt like sleeping on a bomb. I looked at the clock. Past midnight. The house was quiet. Then I heard it. The soft creak of footsteps on the stairs. He was coming back down? Why? I lay still, pretending to sleep, listening. The footsteps stopped outside my door. There was a long pause. Then, the faint sound of a key turning in the lock. From the outside. He was locking me in. The lock clicked shut, and I felt it deep down. I lay still, listening to Greg walk away. He was locking me in my room like a prisoner. I had to get out without him knowing. I waited for silence, then got up. The journal under my mattress felt dangerous, but first I checked the door. The knob turned, but the door was locked from the outside with a key. I was trapped. I fought off panic. Think. The window. My room is on the second floor, but there's an oak tree outside. Emily used to climb it as a girl. I went to the window. The moon was full, lighting the garden. The branch was sturdy but a few feet away. I'm an old woman. I haven't climbed a tree in ages, but I had no choice. Staying meant danger. I put on dark clothes and shoes, took the journal from under the mattress, and tucked it into my cardigan pocket. I opened the window to cool night air. I climbed onto the sill, my joints aching. The branch was ahead. I reached, but it was too far. I had to jump. I took a breath and leaped. My hands caught the branch, and I hung there. I pulled myself up, scraping my arms, and straddled it. Then I shimmied to the trunk and climbed down clumsily. I reached the ground, breathing hard. I stood in the tree's shadow, near the hole Greg had dug. I looked at the house. All dark. I needed to get to the neighbors for help, since my car keys were inside. I started toward the back fence. Then I heard a door open. I hid behind a shrub and looked back. Greg was on the porch, holding a shovel. He walked to the oak tree and knelt by the hole. He dug deeper, then pulled out something large wrapped in dark plastic. He unwrapped a corner. In the moonlight, I saw pale fabric, a blue dress. It was Emily's dress from the last time I saw her. Greg touched it gently, rewrapped it, and put it back. He was revisiting his trophies. He stood and looked right toward my hiding spot. Had he seen me? He took a step my way. I knew I had to run. I didn't wait for Greg. I scrambled over the back fence, my old body aching, and landed hard in the neighbor's dark yard. I hid behind their tool shed, heart pounding, listening. Only night sounds. I peeked back. Greg was gone, just that dark hole under the oak tree. I had to move. I needed a phone. The closest was old Mr. Henderson's house, 3 properties down. I crept along the property lines in the shadows. The journal in my pocket felt so heavy, my only proof. I reached his backyard. A porch light was on, and his TV glowed. I knocked on his back door. He opened it, wary in his robe. "Margaret? What's wrong?" "I need your phone, Carl. It's an emergency. It's Greg." He let me in. His kitchen smelled of coffee. I went straight to the wall phone, hands shaking, and dialed 911. "My name is Margaret. My son-in-law, Greg Harris, has killed people. My daughter is one of them. He has bodies buried at my house." I gave the address, my voice breaking. As I spoke, headlights swept the window. Greg's car pulled into the driveway. "He's here?" I whispered to the operator. "Please hurry." Mr. Henderson looked out. "That's Greg's car." A firm knock came at the front door. Greg's voice called, "Margaret, are you in there?" I was worried. Mr. Henderson moved to answer. "No, don't," I said, but he opened the door. Greg stood there, calm. He held up car keys. "You dropped these." His eyes found mine, cold. "Come home. We can talk." Mr. Henderson, confused, asked, "Is everything all right?" "Just a misunderstanding," Greg said smoothly. "She's been confused since Emily disappeared." He stepped inside. "Come on, Mom. Let's go." I backed away, clutching the phone. Then I heard sirens in the distance, getting closer. Greg heard them too. His smile faded. His hand went to his jacket pocket. The sirens turned onto our street, lights flashing outside. Greg froze, tense. He looked at me, and all pretense dropped. His face was just cold fury. Doors slammed outside as police cars stopped. He didn't run. He just stared at me and said, very softly, "This isn't over, Margaret." The police officers filled Mr. Henderson's living room. Greg's anger switched off, replaced by fake concern. He raised his hands. Officers, thank God. My mother-in-law is having an episode. I was bringing her home. My terror spiked. He was twisting everything. I clutched the journal. He's lying. My voice was strong. I pulled out the book and handed it to a female officer. This is his. My daughter Emily is under the oak tree. There are others. She took it. Greg's jaw tightened. Margaret has been unwell since Emily disappeared, he said, all pity. That's just an old book. She doesn't understand. The officer opened it and scanned a page. Her eyes widened. She looked at her partner. Secure the scene next door. Now. She stepped to Greg. Sir, come with us for questioning. He didn't resist. He gave a sad smile. Of course. But please, be gentle with her. He was performing, painting me as a delusional old woman. My credibility was crumbling. I had to make them see. I insisted on going. Mr. Henderson promised to lock up. Outside, the night was cool with flashing lights. They put Greg in one car and me in another. As I got in, I saw him look through his window. He mouthed, I'm sorry. It wasn't an apology. It was a threat, a promise. At the house, detectives arrived. They set up lights in the garden. I stood on the porch with a blanket, watching them examine the hole. They found the plastic bundle quickly. When they opened it and I saw the blue dress, I looked away. My legs gave out and I sat on the step. The physical proof hollowed me out. A kind-faced detective knelt by me. Mrs. Margaret, we've read the journal. We're taking this seriously. We need to search the whole property, including the cellar. I just nodded, numb. The immediate danger from Greg was shifting to the slow grind of justice. Would it be enough? Then, from the cellar, an officer called out, Detective, you need to see this. His voice was urgent. The detective helped me up. The officer pointed his flashlight into the dark. We tapped the wall. It's hollow, but there's more. He moved the beam. There's a fresh crack. It looks like something's been removed. Sitting in my own kitchen with a female officer named Lopez, I repeated everything I could remember. The bone, the necklace, the sound of the hollow wall. My words felt thin and useless. Greg was downtown in an interrogation room, probably charming them with his concern. The house was now a crime scene, crawling with strangers in gloves and booties. They'd taken the flour canister and the clock weights as evidence. I had nothing left of my proof. My purpose was clear now: survive the night and see Greg charged. But the price was my home, my last connection to Emily, transformed into a grotesque exhibit. Every corner held a memory now poisoned by what lay beneath. Officer Lopez was patient, but I could see the doubt lingering. Greg's narrative of a confused old woman was a persistent weed. The strain came in the form of a phone call. Detective Miller, the kind-faced one, answered his cell. He listened, his expression growing grave. He walked outside for privacy, but I watched through the window. He paced, ran a hand over his face. When he came back in, he looked at me with new intensity. Mrs. Margaret, we've had a lawyer contact the station. A very expensive lawyer from the city. He's representing Gregory and is demanding his immediate release. He's claiming unlawful entry and harassment based on the delusions of a mentally compromised relative. He paused. He's also produced a recent psychiatric evaluation from 6 months ago. It suggests you have episodes of confusion and paranoia. The air left the room. Greg had planned for this. He'd seen me getting suspicious and laid groundwork. The evaluation was a forgery, or he'd manipulated some doctor. It didn't matter. It created doubt. I felt the ground slipping away. "It's a lie," I whispered. "We're still processing the scene," Detective Miller said. "But without concrete physical evidence directly tying him to the journal, his lawyer will push hard. The dress could be explained. He could say it was a memento he buried." He was being honest with me, and that honesty was terrifying. I had to do something. I couldn't just wait. I stood up, my joints aching. "The cellar wall. You said something was removed. What if he moved something today? What if there's another hiding place?" I was grasping, but I had to move. Detective Miller considered me. "We're about to break through that wall. Would you like to be there? It might be difficult." I nodded. I needed to see. We went downstairs. The cellar was bright with construction lights now. An officer was carefully chiseling at the mortar around the hollow-sounding brick. The process was slow. I stood back, watching. The journal entries mentioned trophies kept. If he'd moved them, where? Then the brick came loose. The officer reached into the dark cavity. He pulled out not bones, but a small, modern plastic box. It was sealed tight. He brought it over and opened it on a makeshift table. Inside were driver's licenses, rings, locks of hair, and photographs. All women. On top was a single recent Polaroid. It showed Greg, smiling, standing in this very cellar. In his hand was a small, delicate bone. The timestamp on the photo was from yesterday afternoon. The Polaroid changed everything. Detective Miller held it by the edges, his face set in a hard line. He was documenting it. He muttered, "Arrogant." He looked at me. "This is direct evidence. He's not getting out." Relief washed over me, so profound it made me dizzy. I leaned against the cold stone wall. Greg's meticulous record-keeping, his need to trophy his crimes, had finally trapped him. The immediate threat from his lawyer evaporated in the glare of the construction lights. They bagged the plastic box carefully. Each item represented a life stolen, a family shattered. I thought of those other women, those other daughters. My focus shifted from survival to witnessing. I wanted to see every piece of evidence laid bare, to understand the full scope of the monster I'd lived with. But it came with a deep, weary sorrow that settled in my bones. I was taken to a hotel for the night. An officer stationed outside my door for protection. The silence of the sterile room was worse than the noises of the house. I didn't sleep. The next morning, Detective Miller picked me up. Greg had been formally charged with multiple counts of murder. The news vans were already camped outside the police station. Miller used the back entrance to bring me in for a formal statement. As we walked through the fluorescent-lit hallway, I saw him through a glass window in an interview room. Greg sat perfectly still, his expensive lawyer whispering urgently beside him. Greg's eyes met mine. There was no anger now, just a cold, empty calculation. He gave me a small, almost imperceptible nod. It felt like a promise. After my statement, which was recorded on video, I was asked to wait in a small, quiet room. A victim's advocate brought me tea. The advocate, a soft-spoken woman named Sarah, explained what would come next. The media, the trial, the endless waiting. It was another kind of prison. The strain was no longer about immediate danger, but about enduring the long, public unraveling of my family's private hell. Then, Detective Miller entered with a file. "We've identified several of the women from the licenses," he said. "Families are being notified. We also found something else." He placed a photograph on the table. It was a picture of a house I didn't recognize, a cabin in the woods. In the journal, he references a lake property. We think he might have used it. We're getting a search warrant. Before I could process this, Sarah's phone buzzed. She looked at it, then at me, her face pale. I'm sorry, Margaret. The press has your name. They've dug up your background. They're calling it the grandmother versus monster story. It's going to be everywhere. She showed me her phone screen. A news headline blared. Grieving mom unearths son-in-law's killing den. I felt exposed, raw. My private loss was now public spectacle. But as I looked at the photo of the remote cabin, a new chilling thought occurred. The journal had entries spanning years. What if the cellar and the garden weren't the only places? What if there were more graves, somewhere else, that Greg had never written down? The following weeks were a blur of grim routine. I moved into a small rented apartment paid for by a victim's fund. The hotel had felt temporary, but this place, with its beige walls and faint smell of carpet cleaner, felt like a surrender. All I wanted was to get through each day, to be ready for the pre-trial hearings. The price was my entire past life, boxed up and stored away, too painful to look at. The house was sealed by the court. The strain came from unexpected places. A reporter managed to get my new phone number and called, asking for a comment. I hung up, but my hands shook for an hour. Greg's family, his mother and sister, released a statement to the press, calling him a devoted husband, and suggesting I had always been jealous of his bond with Emily. Their words were like poison darts, designed to cloud the issue. They didn't know, or chose not to believe, the evidence. It made the public narrative messy, and I felt myself being painted as a possible villain in a twisted drama. My only solace was the district attorney, a sharp, no-nonsense woman named Clara Ross. She met with me regularly, preparing me for what was to come. The evidence is overwhelming, she assured me. The journal, the trophies, the forensic match on the dress fibers to Emily's wardrobe. We're excavating the entire garden. We've found more. She didn't elaborate, but her grim tone said enough. The cabin was clean. He was careful there. But we have enough. Then, a development froze my blood. Clara called me to her office. We've received a communication, she said, her lips pressed into a thin line. From Gregory, through his lawyer. He wants to make a deal. He's offering to reveal the locations of all the remains, for closure for the families, in exchange for taking the death penalty off the table. I stared at her. He's bargaining with the dead? It's common, Clara said, though she looked disgusted. But there's a condition. He'll only reveal the locations to one person. You. The room seemed to tilt. Me? Why? He says you're the only one he trusts to do it right. Clara's eyes were hard. It's a power play. He wants to see you, to control the narrative one last time. We can refuse. We have a strong case without it. I thought of the other families, waiting, wondering. The not knowing was a special kind of torture. I knew it well. Greg was using my own empathy as a weapon. The weight of the decision was immense. If I said no, would those families blame me? If I said yes, I'd have to sit in a room with the man who killed my child. I'll do it, I heard myself say. But on my terms, in a secure room, with you present, and it's recorded. I want it done. The room at the county jail was cold and smelled of antiseptic and stale coffee. I sat at a plain metal table, Clara Ross beside me. A video camera hummed in the corner. A guard brought Greg in. He wore an orange jumpsuit, his hands cuffed in front of him. He looked thinner, older, but his eyes were the same, calm and watchful. He sat down across from me, a faint smile on his lips. "Hello, Margaret," he said. His voice was soft. "You look well." I said nothing. All I had to do was get through this, to get the information and leave. The price was sitting 3 feet from pure evil, breathing the same air. Clara spoke first. "This is not a social visit, Mr. Harris. You offered information. Provide it." Greg ignored her, his gaze fixed on me. "I knew you'd come. You have a strong sense of duty. It's what made you such a good mother." The compliment was a blade. "I loved Emily, you know, truly. She was just part of the process." I clenched my hands under the table. "Where are they?" My voice was flat. He leaned forward slightly. "All in the journal. The coordinates are in the back, written in invisible ink, lemon juice. I knew you'd find it eventually. You're thorough." He sounded almost proud. "The lake property was a red herring. I only used it once. The rest are closer to home. 2 in the state park, North Hiking Trail, mile markers 7 and 11. 1 in the old quarry off Route 9. And Emily—" He paused, watching my face. "Emily is under the oak tree. You knew that. But she's deep. 6 feet, exactly. I wanted her to have that." I felt Clara tense beside me. This was his confession, delivered with chilling precision. He was giving us what we needed, but he was also reliving it, forcing me to picture it. "Why are you doing this?" I asked, the question escaping before I could stop it. "Closure," he said, echoing his own word from the kitchen. "For you. And for me. Now we're even." He leaned back. "The deal is done. My lawyer has the paperwork." Clara nodded to the guard. "We're finished." As the guard moved to take him away, Greg kept his eyes on me. "There's one more thing, Margaret. A personal message." The guard paused. Greg's smile returned, small and cruel. "The hummingbird necklace? You have it, in the flower. I know you moved it. Keep it safe. It's all that's left of her now." Then he stood, allowing himself to be led out. He didn't look back. His final words were a reminder that he'd been aware of my every move, even from jail. He'd known about the flour canister. He'd let me think I was clever. The oppressive weight of his omnipresent gaze, even now, was something I couldn't shake. I sat there, cold to my core, as Clara placed a steadying hand on my arm. The hunt was over, but the shadow he cast felt endless. The weeks after meeting Greg in jail faded into a grey blur. I was just trying to survive until the trial. But a low-grade fear followed me everywhere. His last words about the necklace stuck in my head. He knew I took it from the flour can. Had he been watching me? The police said he had no contacts, but I still felt his eyes on me. My whole life was now about the legal process. My lawyer, Clara Ross, prepped me for my testimony. We went over every detail until the story felt worn out and distant, like it happened to someone else. Clara warned me the defense would try to paint me as unstable, a grieving mother who invented a nightmare. They would use that fake psychiatric report. My word was the battlefield. I found a small focus. I bought a potted rose for my balcony. Tending to it each morning grounded me. It was a tiny act of normalcy, something Greg had no part of. Then, a week before the trial, Clara called. Her voice was tense. "The defense filed a motion. They claim the journal and trophy box were planted. They say you had access to the house and a motive to frame Greg over Emily's estate." I was stunned. "That's ridiculous." "It's their strategy," Clara said. "They want to create doubt. They've also subpoenaed your personal records, medical and financial. They'll dig for anything." I felt the walls closing in again. The law was a game, and Greg was still playing from his cell. My quiet balcony life was an illusion. The fear turned into a cold knot of anger. He was trying to make me look like the criminal. Help came from an unexpected place. Detective Miller visited. He didn't discuss the case. He just handed me a small evidence bag. Inside was the cleaned hummingbird necklace. "The chain's broken," he said. "It's been processed. We're done with it. I thought you should have it." I took the bag. The silver bird was cool against the plastic. This was the proof that started it all. It wasn't planted. I found it. Holding it, the fear faded, replaced by a cold certainty. He could the story, but I knew the truth. I had held the bone. I had heard the hollow wall. This necklace was my anchor. The doorbell rang as Miller left. A courier had a formal envelope. I signed and opened it. It was a subpoena for a deposition from Greg's defense team. It was for tomorrow. A note from his lawyer was attached. "We look forward to clarifying your version of events." A threat on legal paper. I looked from the subpoena to the necklace in my hand. Tomorrow I'd face his lawyers, but I had my evidence right here. The deposition room was sterile and tense. I sat with Clara Ross at a long table. Across from us were Greg's lawyer, a man named Dryden, and a junior associate. A court reporter sat ready. Dryden began with polite questions about my health, my finances, and my state of mind after Emily vanished. He was building a profile of a confused, desperate woman. I focused on staying calm and sticking to the facts. It meant reliving the pain. His tone was gentle, but every question was a tiny scalpel. He asked about my move into Greg's house. "Were you having financial difficulties, Mrs. Margaret?" "It was Greg's suggestion, after Emily was gone." "So you depended on his generosity?" Clara objected. Relevance. The tension grew. Dryden circled the evidence. "You say you found a bone, yet no forensic evidence links it to your daughter. It could have been from an animal." "It was with her necklace," I said. "A necklace you admit to moving and hiding. If you believed you had found human remains, why not call the police immediately? Why hide it?" His eyes were keen, looking for instability. I met his gaze. "I was afraid of the man I lived with." He shifted. "You've had memory lapses. Your doctor's notes mention confusion." "I am an older woman. I am not confused about what I found." My voice was steady, but inside I trembled. Then he changed direction. Dryden placed a photo of the antique grandfather clock on the table. "You claimed Mr. Harris never maintained this clock?" "It hasn't worked in years." "Our investigator found something," Dryden said, with a hint of triumph. He placed another photo showing the clock's inside. A small, clear space in the dust. "This shows a recent disturbance. An object was removed from this spot recently. You hid the journal there, didn't you? After taking it from his study." He was right. That's exactly what I had done. Clara was about to object, but I spoke first. "I hid it there because I found it in his lockbox. I was afraid he would destroy it. The disturbance is from my hand. Your investigator is very good. He can probably also see the decades of undisturbed dust around that spot, proving nothing had been there before I did it." Dryden blinked. He hadn't expected that. He moved on quickly, but the small victory was mine. I had given a simple, truthful answer that reinforced my fear of his client. The deposition ended after 2 grueling hours. As we left, Dryden approached. "A robust performance, Mrs. Margaret. The jury will find your certainty remarkable." It was meant to unnerve me. I didn't reply. Outside, Clara squeezed my arm. "You did well. He was fishing. He didn't catch anything." Back in my apartment, the exhaustion was deep. The trial started in 3 days. I sat on my balcony, the hummingbird necklace now on a new chain around my neck, hidden under my blouse. I touched it through the fabric. The legal battle was a storm I had to walk through. But the necklace, cold against my skin, was real. It was my compass. No lawyer's words could change its weight. The trial was a long and cold theatre of justice. I gave my testimony, answering every question as clearly as I could. I looked over at Greg, who sat perfectly still, his face a blank mask, showing no emotion at all. The jury was shown all the evidence: my daughter's journal, the terrible photos, his collection of trophies. They listened to the forensic experts talk about soil composition and fiber analysis, linking him to the sites. But they did not see the monster I knew. They only saw a quiet man in a suit and an old grandmother telling a horrific, unbelievable story. The jury's deliberation was surprisingly brief. The verdict came back: guilty on every single count. There was no dramatic outcry from him. Greg simply nodded once, slowly, as if someone had confirmed a minor piece of business for him. He was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Multiple life sentences, to be exact, one for each life he took. The judge spoke about profound depravity and offered hopes for closure. In the gallery, the families of the other women wept quietly. I just felt a vast, hollow stillness inside me, like an empty room. Afterwards, there were no news cameras waiting for me outside. My friend Clara had managed a very discreet exit for us both. I went straight back to my little apartment. Just like that, it was over. The giant, terrifying shape that had filled my life for so many months was gone, but it was replaced by a strange, permanent absence. A quiet I wasn't used to. I never went back to that house. It was sold, and all the proceeds were placed in a trust fund for the victims' families. With my share, I bought a small, simple cottage not too far from where I'd grown up as a girl. It had a sweet little patch of earth in the back that got good, full sun all afternoon. On a cool and perfectly clear morning in early spring, I took the potted rose from my old balcony and brought it out to the garden. I dug a hole in the soft, fresh soil. It was hard work for my old shoulders, an ache that felt clean and honest. At the very bottom of the hole, I placed a small, sealed metal box. Inside it was the delicate hummingbird necklace. I didn't feel I needed to wear it anymore. It was finally time to put it to rest, to bury the past with care. I settled the rose bush gently over the spot, pressing the dark soil firm around its roots with my hands. I watered it carefully with the can. It was a simple yellow rose bush. It would bloom when it was good and ready, all in its own time. I've learned there is no grand, sweeping justice that fixes everything, no magical peace that simply erases the past. There is only the quiet, daily persistence of life afterwards, of moving forward. The trial is a public record in a book somewhere. Greg is just a number in a vast system now. But here in my own garden, a rose grows over a tiny buried secret. I tend to it. I water it and watch for weeds. Some days, the weight of it all feels so terribly heavy. Other days, I just see a lovely flower trying to grow. I sit on my porch in the warm afternoons. I watch the light change on the leaves, and I breathe the air that is finally, completely, my own. The long story is done. Now there is only the living left to do.